Jody Avirgan here. I'm glad you're enjoying 30 for 30 podcast, part of a special collection of sports audio documentaries from ESPN Films. We're finding the best sports stories for you right now. And to do that, we're behind the wheel of the Mini Countryman, the biggest mini yet.
Please proceed to the highlighted route.
To find great sports stories, you have to get out into the world and follow your instincts. That's where the Mini Countryman's all-wheel drive comes in handy. With all four, we can chase down a story in the city, the country, and most places in between. Podcast equipment isn't very bulky, but even if we're hauling a lot of gear, there's plenty of cargo space for all your stuff. And if a few of our producers tag along, no problem. The Mini Countryman comfortably seats 5 adults. The Countryman may be big, but it still drives like a Mini thanks to the twin-power turbo engine. No matter what story you're chasing, the Mini Countryman will help you find it. It's available now, and so are 30 for 30 podcasts. Visit miniusa.com/countryman today.
This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A.
What's going on, everybody? A good Tuesday afternoon. Dan Graca sitting in for my man Stephen A. Smith here on ESPN Radio. Phone number is 866-ESPN, 866-729-3776. We'll be joined a little bit later on in the program by our ESPN NBA analyst, insider, Bobby Marks, as we go around the association. Big one tonight down the street at Madison Square Garden between the Knicks and the L.A. Lakers as the Lonzo Ball show comes to the big city. We will go around the league with Bobby a little bit later on, and a lot on the agenda for today. As per usual, you could tweet at me at Dan Graca, Graca, and we'll get it cooking here with some NFL action from last night, the Monday Night Showdown. And we have seen this before, haven't we? We've seen Tom Brady and Bill Belichick go down to Miami and stub their toe. And that's exactly what went down last night as the Pats dropped to 10-3, lose their first game away from Foxborough this season, and they get beat up by Jay Cutler and the Dolphins. Brady has a rough night at the office. Cutler looks like the guy that everybody is drooling over with the rocket arm and the pinpoint accuracy, and had himself a fantastic evening last night, really outplayed Tom Brady. And Brady had a rough night at the office. It happens, but it's funny because the things that I've heard this morning about this game and about the fallout from what we saw from the Patriots last night, conveniently enough, everybody seems to just want to forget the fact that, Rob Gronkowski wasn't in the mix. And that's a big part of it. You know, when you take away your security blanket, when you take away one of the most deadly weapons that you have in the National Football League, and a guy who, let's face it, with Tom Brady have formed one of the best combinations in all the National Football League over the last several years, that's going to affect, at least to some degree, what happens in the game last night. Now, look, Patriot defense wasn't very good last night. Okay, I mean, that had nothing to do with Rob Gronkowski, but, not having Gronk in the mix, I certainly think played a role in what happened to the Patriots offensively. That being said, though, a couple of things. Number one, as far as Cutler is concerned, all right, I encourage all of you, and the Dolphins can do whatever they want, but don't fall into the trap. Do not fall into the trap. All right, Jay Cutler has the ability to pull out one of these games every so often. Once in a blue moon, he can do this. Right, he's going to wow you. He's going to make you think that, he's got all the answers. He's the franchise quarterback. He's the savior. He's the guy that we got to build our football team around. That's not the case, though, because far too often he's a mess. He's a disaster. All right? But for one night, he actually came to play. And the Dolphins still have a pulse. They're still in the mix. And they're sitting there at 6-7. Again, still on the outside looking in terms of the playoff picture in the AFC. But they have a shot heading into week number 15. And if you look at the landscape right now in the AFC, this is how crazy a season it's been, right, in that conference. The Buffalo Bills, who, say what you want, they're not a great team. They're not an awful team. They're an okay team. They had the disaster just a few weeks ago of benching Tyrod Taylor, to going back to Tyrod Taylor, to going back to Nathan Peterman, to going to Joe Webb. I mean, they've played the quarterback carousel game as much as anybody this year. The Buffalo Bills, once the smoke clears, they're sitting there at 7-6 and have a spot there with the last wild card in the AFC. Now, they still got 3 more games to play, but everything that's happened to that football team this year, even surviving a blizzard on Sunday in Buffalo, which was very cool to see, by the way. Very cool. I wish we get one of those a week. But Buffalo's sitting there still with a shot, still with an opportunity. As far as the Patriots are concerned, it's funny because one loss, and it gets people almost wanting to press the panic button about this football team. Like, haven't we been through this before? Right? The people several years ago, when they had that horrific showing, that Monday night game in Kansas City, and Belichick then coined the phrase, on to Cincinnati, and they ended up winning the Super Bowl that year. Right? Think about week one, the opening night of the season this year, on that Thursday night, against those same Kansas City Chiefs. Got smoked up at Gillette Stadium. And people are already starting to predict the demise of this football team. Boy, that defense is terrible. There's no way you can win with that defense. Maybe Belichick is a little over his head. They're not going to be able to dig out from this. What did they do? Right? They only rolled off how many wins in a row? And they're still sitting there in pretty good position at 10-3, a spot that most teams would love to be in right now in the National Football League. But because, we still have 3 more weeks in the season, and we still have a lot of things that we have to sift through, people are going to sit there and say, well, you got the Steeler game coming up next week. That's a big game. And, oh, by the way, if the Patriots lose that one, because it's on the road, it's at it's at Heinz Field in Pittsburgh, that if the Pats lose that one, they all of a sudden now have the prospects of not even getting a first-round bye. How about that? That they're going to have to play that opening weekend of the NFL playoffs. And that the Jacksonville Jaguars, if they then win out and win their next 3, they, at 12-4, would actually win the tiebreaker over the Patriots and get a 2 seed and a first-round bye. People, relax. I mean, really, let's relax for a second. First of all, okay, number one, before we even get into the Patriots situation, what have the Jacksonville Jaguars won in the last, I don't know how many years? Like, seriously, can you really expect this football team, I don't care who they're playing, right? I know they got the Texans coming into their building, and TJ Yates is going to be the quarterback this week, and Houston is all banged up from top to bottom. I get that. All right, and then they're going to San Francisco to take on the 49ers. And, oh, by the way, Jimmy Garoppolo still has not lost a game that he has started in his NFL career. This is the Jacksonville Jaguars, right? It's the Jaguars. A team that just a couple of weeks ago lost to the Cardinals, who are a walking mess this year. They lost to the Jets earlier in the season. Do you really have faith that the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to win the next 3 games and win out? Like, we should just chalk up W's for the Jaguars? Really? You can go ahead and make that bet. Go right ahead. You got my blessing. Go do it. I'm not jumping in with 2 feet. And back to the Patriots. Let me ask you a question. Okay, you watch the NFL. You followed this team over the years. Explain to me, when was the time that the Pittsburgh Steelers, in a big spot, knocked off Brady and Belichick when they had to? Anybody remember that game? I remember in 2008 when the Steelers went into Foxborough and beat up the Patriots, but there was a guy named Castle who was quarterbacking New England that day, not Brady. Every big game the Pats and the Steelers have played in the last 15 years has gone by the way of New England. And as long as number 12 is under center, hey, how many times have we seen in this guy's career, right? In his career, whether you like him, whether you don't like him. When was the last time you saw Brady have 2 stinkers back-to-back? Tell me. How often does that happen? It happens about as often as Halley's Comet does. So I'm going to reserve judgment in all of this. Boy, New England's not even going to have a first-round bye this year. Nonsense. New England's going to go into Heinz Field this week, and they're going to beat the Steelers like they always do. Like they always do. Because look at this Pittsburgh team, who very easily last week at home nearly stubbed their toe against the rival Ravens. And that's a rivalry game, which they had a hard time getting up for in the first half. And I don't even think the Ravens are any good. They're a nice team, but they're not a legit contender. And oh, by the way, the week before that, they almost laid an egg in Cincinnati. And now you got the Patriots coming in, who are angry, who are annoyed, who who are coming off an awful football game on national TV in prime time, that's almost the lock of the week. Chalk it up. And I'm the furthest thing from a Patriots fan, believe me, the furthest thing from a Patriots fan. But to sit here and prematurely predict their demise, I mean, you got to be crazy. You have to be crazy to bet against those two guys and that football team. I'm not saying they're winning a championship, but pump the brakes a little bit. Still got a lot more football to play. I'm going to sit here and put more faith in the Jacksonville Jaguars and Blake freaking Bortles than I am Tom Brady? Really? No thanks. I'll pass. 866-ESPN, 866-729-3776. We also got to get into the balance of power over in the other conference in the NFC. Because it was Sunday, Bloody Sunday, again, unfortunately, for a big-time quarterback, and that was Carson Wentz going down with the ACL out there in L.A. So the Philadelphia Eagles season, which had Super Bowl aspirations, and it looked like they had as good a bet as anybody to get to the Super Bowl in the NFC, that all goes up in smoke. Nothing against Nick Foles. Nick Foles, a nice young man. Nick Foles had a great season as the starting quarterback under Chip Kelly a few years ago, but Nick Foles is who Nick Foles is, right? He's a good backup quarterback. I don't think he's getting you to the Super Bowl. You know, in Philadelphia's got weapons. Got weapons in the passing game, got weapons in the run game. Their defense will get after you, rushing the passer and that sort of thing. Yeah, that's all well and good. But Carson Wentz was the guy who made that team go. And I just think it might be a little much for this team to be able to get up off the mat and to say that, oh, yeah, we're going to go to a Super Bowl now and just proceed as if it's business as usual. This is a guy who was en route to winning the MVP, and it stinks as a football fan. It absolutely stinks, and I hate it. I hate it. You want to see good players, right? The last 6, 7, 8 weeks, I don't know how long it's been, that Aaron Rodgers has been on the sidelines. You think watching the Green Bay Packers play each week was any fun? You know, no offense to Brett Hundley. I can't wait for Rodgers to get back under center this week. Cannot wait. The Carson Wentz injury is like the 2017 version of what happened to Derek Carr last year. Remember, he broke his leg on Christmas Eve. So the Raider fan who saw their season go up in smoke last year, that's what's happening to an Eagle fan now. And it's awful because we all pay the price as football fans, right? That is one team that was doing some really special things this year, in all likelihood, aren't going to be able to finish it off. Stranger things have happened, though. But now you look at some teams right now in the National Football League, in the NFC, who are in first place, who are going to be quarterbacked by Nick Foles, by Case Keenum, and by Jared Goff. Who saw that coming before the season started? Who predicted that one? Who had the Vegas bet on that one? Let's talk some football. 866-ESPN, 866-729-3776. As I said, we'll be joined by Bobby Marks a little bit later on, do some NBA with him. The fallout continues from Giancarlo Stanton going to the Yankees. Yanks made another move today, trading off Chase Headley back to the San Diego Padres, opening up a spot on the 40-man roster. Little bit of salary flexibility. We'll see what they do with that. We know that they're on the warpath for some pitching. And what do we make of Derek Jeter? And what do we make of his early tenure as the man in charge of that Marlins franchise? Not so good. Not so good. The 8 or 9 people that call themselves Marlins fans might have just jumped off the bandwagon, I think. It's Dan Graca filling in for Stephen A. It's ESPN Radio.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Dan Graca in for Stephen A. It's ESPN Radio on a Tuesday, 12th day of the 12th month. Do you believe that? We're in December 12th already? Do you believe that? Boy, time is flying by. Holidays are upon us. 866-ESPN, 888-203-76. Not like I've had any time to do some shopping. Although at this day and age, I don't know why anybody would even leave their house to go shopping. Right? Everything is at your fingertips. The World Wide Web, the world is at your fingers. That's how you got to do the shopping. Let them bring the gifts to you and leave them at the front door. That's the easiest way. You avoid the aggravation. You avoid the lines. You probably get better deals, too. So I think that's the way to go. We were talking about the Patriots and the win last night, or the loss last night, I should say, against the Miami Dolphins. Brady now 7-9 in Miami in his career. But as is usual, Bill Belichick, and it doesn't happen that often, but whenever Bill Belichick is on the losing end of a game, his press conferences aren't exactly, let's say, chatty. He doesn't take losing that well. And last night was no exception. So after the game last night, somebody brought up the fact, as I did earlier in the show, that, no Rob Gronkowski last night. Is that really directly to blame for why you were so poor offensively?
I don't know how many times we've been through this. We call the play, we run the route, based on the coverage they're in, the decision the quarterback makes, throw the ball to the open guy. We don't go back and throw it to one guy. Like, we're going to throw 10 passes to a receiver, we're going to throw 10 passes to a tight end. It's based on that route, it's based on the coverage, it's based on the quarterback, the decision the quarterback makes on that play. So we can look at each play, go through each read, talk to the quarterback, and try to answer your question that way. Like, I just can't do that right now. Like, no, we want to try to throw every pass to one guy. We never do that.
It more appears like their coverage was dictating when they played with certain coverage.
I mean, we threw the ball to everybody. We didn't really hit much anything.
I've heard people that have had root canal surgeries without Novocaine, like 5 minutes after it was completed, sound more upbeat than Bill Belichick just there. I mean, he is a jewel. He really is. And it's fantastic. So if you don't like the Patriots, you almost like get that extra incentive that not only do the Patriots lose, but then you get Bill Belichick postgame, which is just gold. It really is. And that's just the beginning. Because, of course, we had to get into the fact, why do you guys struggle, it seems like, with the Miami Dolphins? As I said, Tom Brady in his career now is 7-9 in Miami against the Fish. So, Coach, what is it with the struggles in Miami?
Can you put your hand? Not any particular reason why. There seems to be continuous struggles every year you come down here. It's 4 out of 5 years now you've lost down here.
I don't know.
Put your hand on anything why here is such a struggle.
Were you here last year?
Well, last year you lost the previous
Yeah,
year.
so look, every game's its own game, okay? I mean, I don't think what happened 5 years ago has anything to do with tonight.
No, he's kind of right about that, But he wanted to, so it's funny because Belichick is the guy, the on to Cincinnati guy. We're on to Cincinnati, we're moving on, we're not looking back. But yet Belichick wanted to go in the time machine and bring up last year's game that the Patriots actually won. Selective amnesia, as they like to say. And how about that onside kick at the end of the game when, the last futile attempt for the Patriots to see if they can get one more possession and try to maybe engineer one more miracle to win the football game. Let's just say it didn't go too well. It looks like something they drew up in the dirt, much less practiced all week. So the coach was asked, what about that onside kick play at the end of the game?
Can you explain the onside kick, what happened with that kick?
They recovered it.
They recovered it, plain and simple. Nothing more, nothing less. It was recovered. We lost. We'll see you next week. On to Pittsburgh. And I'll tell you, just listen to that. If you're a betting man or woman, you really think that team is going into Pittsburgh next week and laying another egg? You really believe that? Come on. I mean, that's as safe a bet. That is as safe a pick as you can have maybe all year. If you're fortunate enough to still be in some sort of knockout pool, that's your selection if you still got the Pats. I'm sorry. And normally you stay away from those type of games. Pats aren't losing 2 in a row. Or if they are, the Steelers are going to have to play the game of their lives. And they have been far from perfect the last couple of times out. And again, show me the last time, show me any time, in a big spot, Mike Tomlin and the Steelers have beat Bill Belichick, Tom Brady, and the Patriots. You're not going to find it. All right, let's hear from you. 866-SAY-ESPN, 866-729-3776. Bill in Queens, going to start us off here on ESPN Radio. Hello, Bill.
Good afternoon. Thanks for taking my call.
What's up, Bill?
I absolutely agree with you. You don't write off Tom Brady because he laid an egg last night. But I don't think that it's a given that New England's going to come in and trounce all over Pittsburgh. You're absolutely correct. It's going to be a war. But to just say Miami has like the second to worst defense in all of football. Pittsburgh's number 4. I think they're ranked number 4. It's not a given that Tom Brady is going to come in and beats Pittsburgh. That's just my personal feeling. I don't think he's.
Well, I mean, when you say trounce, I never said the word trounce, but I think that New England's going to win the football game. I don't expect them to go in there and win, 40-3, but I think the Patriots, from start to finish, are going to find a way to get it done. They usually do.
They play like they played last night, and I think that last night was an example of, and it doesn't happen often, the key to beating Tom Brady is your defense has to be on point and put pressure. And once you get pressure on him, he does not do well. His offensive line has always been, you look at the Giants when they had success in beating him in the Super Bowl, their defense pounded him. That was the success for the Giants. That was the recipe.
And they hit him pretty good last night, too. Let's not forget. I mean, they put some pressure on him. There was a lot of hits. He was running for his life. And the question is, are the Pittsburgh Steelers going to be able to do that sort of thing? And the other thing, too, and Bill, thank you for the phone call, I think you got to get some turnovers, too. And this is a Pittsburgh team that has a very, very quick strike offense. They are certainly capable. But with Gronk coming back into the mix again next week, that's also going to add another dimension to that football team. Hey, bet against them at your own peril, as they say. That's the bottom line. Austin and Charlotte, you're on ESPN Radio. What's up, Austin? How are you?
Hey, doing well. Appreciate you taking my call. Just wanted to switch gears a little bit. Obviously, the game last night was pretty jarring as far as the Patriots' performance, but wanted to shine a light on the NFC South and wanted to get your thoughts on the race there, as tight as it is. Just wanted to get your thoughts. I'll take the comments off air. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, to be honest with you. And you have all three teams neck and neck with the Saints and the Panthers and the Falcons. Look, I don't think any one of them is perfect by any stretch of the imagination. And right now, if you ask me to wager a guess as to what team that I believe in the most, it's probably the New Orleans Saints. And I didn't think that there was in a million years I would be able to say that at the beginning of the season. Would not. The Saints got a Jets team coming in this week that's going to be starting Bryce Petty, all right, coming off of a clunker last week in Denver. All right, they have the rematch with the Atlanta Falcons, and they're still kicking themselves about the way that one went down on Thursday night. But they get the Falcons back in their building as well, and then they got to go on the road in Week 17 and play a Buccaneers team that looks like it's packed it in for the season. All right, so I would be surprised if the New Orleans Saints don't find a way to win that division. Now, we're going to have to see what happens with Alvin Kamara and the fact that he left that game Thursday with a concussion. He is a very, very important part of that offense. They're going to need him to be healthy. And with head injuries and concussions, there's no definitive timetable on when a guy is going to be ready. But I wouldn't sleep on Carolina either. If you ask me to, the pecking order of those three teams, I think I'd put more faith in New Orleans 1, Carolina 2, and Atlanta number 3. I just think something is missing with this Falcons team this year. There's just something that's not right. I mean, even a couple of games that they won this year, they were fortunate to snake on by. That Jet game in the monsoon where the Jets missed 3-4 field goals. They were lucky to get out of that one. Even go back to Week 1, the game they won against the Bears with that goal line stand. The game in Detroit earlier this season where you had the touchdown that was overturned there at the goal line. So they have been very, very fortunate, and it's been an adjustment process for them. Admittedly, not having Kyle Shanahan and what it's done to the offense. So we'll play it out here over the next 3 weeks, and that's one of the good things that you have these teams who are neck and neck in division races going against each other down the stretch, and we're trying to decide some of these playoff spots. We'll sprinkle in some Stanton talk, too, coming up at 866-SAY-ESPN, 866-729-3776. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Oh, yeah! Dan Graca in for Stephen A. Taking it till 3 o'clock Eastern here on ESPN Radio. You know the number. It's 866-ESPN, 866-729-3776. People still trying to get over the shockwaves of Giancarlo Stanton, Don in the pinstripes, number 27, introduced yesterday at the winter meetings as the newest acquisition for the New York Yankees. Well, technically, the newest acquisition is Jabari Blash, who was an outfielder from the San Diego Padres. They picked him up earlier today in exchange for Chase Headley, Brian Mitchell, and cash considerations. But clearly, Jabari Blash is not going to, register the shockwaves that Giancarlo Stanton did. And it really wasn't even so much, with him now being a Yankee and you get your first glimpse of him wearing the pinstripes, wearing the cap and all that. It's more about what he had to say than anything else. And look, Stanton has been one of these guys who, I get it, he's a home run hitter. He's a defending MVP, but for the most part, he was playing in relative obscurity, right? I think to a lot of people in and around Major League Baseball, and baseball is the sport that is really more of a local game than a national game. It really is, let's be honest, right? You play 162 games, it's damn near impossible to go out there and be able to digest as much information about each and every one of these teams, like let's say you would with the NFL, who they play once a week, they play 16 games, and you have a little bit more time to kind of pick and choose what's going on with each of these clubs, right? Baseball, it's impossible. You have a hard enough time keeping up with your own team, wherever you may call home. It's hard. And Stanton, to me, is like one of these guys who you hear a lot. I think to the average fan, you hear a lot about him, but you don't get a chance to see him play on a day-in, day-out basis. He's like the guy who every summer when the NBA draft rolls around, you got this one big hotshot prospect who's taking up shop in Europe and who's wowing people over there, and he's going to be a lottery pick in the NBA, but nobody's really seen him play. And I think to a lot of people, that's what Giancarlo Stanton is. Despite the fact that he's been in home run derbies, he's been an all-star, he won the MVP, now he is going to be on center stage. Now he's going to be playing games in front of more than just 13 people. And good for him. Good for him. And it was interesting to me. I was kind of surprised, but I was also glad at some of the things he said yesterday in the various media briefings he did upon being introduced as a Yankee. And he really threw it back in the face of the Marlins organization, of ownership, and really had a message for the fans. And I've always said this about the Marlins, all right? If they're going to continue to operate like a minor league franchise and not pump any resources at all into the ball club. Forget about the stadium. Okay, forget about the stadium, forget about the ballpark. Nobody goes to it. Nobody wanted any part of it. It was unnecessary. All right, they wanted to sit there and make it as if playing in the old Dolphins stadium was the reason that they didn't draw. Well, now they got a brand new stadium, and I heard it's a disaster. I've never been down there. Heard it's a disaster. Everybody that I know who has been there says it is a train wreck. From a logistical standpoint, from a getting to and from standpoint, it is a nightmare. And now they're not even going to give you worth anything on the baseball field to pay your money to come watch. I'm not in a position, never have been, never will be, to sit here and to try to tell anybody how they should spend some money, right? You have disposable income, God bless you. You go do what you want with it. But why would you support a team? Why would you support a fan base that really isn't interesting to provide any sort of entertainment value or any sort of winning for their fans? Why would you want to do that? Right? Why would you? I was saying the same thing about the Philadelphia 76ers for the last 4 or 5 years when they were going through the process and they were tanking and they really didn't care about winning games. I wouldn't give them $1 to go watch that product during that time. And it's the same thing with the Marlins. I hope nobody goes to the game. I hope they unlock the doors next year and turn on the lights and put on the scoreboard and start pumping the music in there. And I hope there is not a single soul in one of those seats. Wouldn't that be fun to watch? And they deserve it. They absolutely deserve it. And starting with Derek Jeter. Jeter knew what he was getting himself into, but Jeter made his situation even worse. And I don't know if this is the fact that you're talking about an athlete and a guy who's going to the Hall of Fame and a guy who's an iconic player, but now he ventures into the business side of things, onto the business world, and he's thinking, well, you know what, it's just going to be just as easy as it was for me as a player. I'm going to have the same results, the same success as I did when I was playing between the white lines. Well, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Because when you're a player, you go out there and you worry about yourself, right? You get yourself in the right frame of mind before the game. You sit at your locker. You do your pregame routine, your preparation. You eat the same meal, the same stretching exercise, whatever you got to do. And then you go out there and play. And for almost 2 decades, he did it pretty darn good. But now when you're running a team, you're in charge of everything. Everything. As opposed to he steps in the batter's box, 4 times a night, and he takes a couple of hacks. When the ball's hit to him in the field, you catch it, you throw to first base, that's it. Now, you decide to make a move? You want to trade somebody off? There's a trickle-down effect. Okay? There's a finance aspect of things. There's a public relations side of things. On and on and on. You're not just in charge of the 25 guys you have on that roster or the 40-man roster. No, you're in charge of the entire organization, which means the office staff, right? Names, people, hardworking employees who we don't know their names, right? They don't have a number attached to their names or an inflated salary. They don't have a baseball card. They don't have stats on the back of it. They're just hardworking guys like you and me with families, with responsibilities, things like that. He's in charge of everything, right? Some employees they had in the organization a little bit more noteworthy than others, like the Andre Dawsons, the Jeff Conines, the Tony Perez's, guys like that, the Jack McKeons, who he decided, you know what? Gonna get rid of them. Don't need them. As if they had any control or any input as to why the Marlins weren't winning, right? As to why the Marlins were a floundering franchise because they had some of those names as ambassadors to the organization. And Derek said, we don't need them. And I'd rather cut off the salary, whatever those guys were making, and start fresh here. You even heard some things that they cleared out the announcing crew for Fox Sports down there in Florida, the people that call their games. And it's still to be determined, you play the connect the dots game as if Jeter had any say in that, like the announcers are the reason that the team was losing. I mean, come on. But the problem here with Jeter is that the one thing that he hasn't shown is accountability. And he's always been accountable as a player. And so far, as an owner, he's been anything but. Anything but. And give Giancarlo Stanton credit for calling out his bluff. Stanton's told you yesterday exactly what went down in Miami. Is that they told him, look, we talked to the Giants, we talked to the Cardinals, we got a deal worked out. If you don't accept the deal, then there's a chance you're going to be a Marlin, right? And Stanton said, well, fine, do what you got to do. Only to be a winner at the end when the Yankees came calling to take that money off the books, and now he's playing for New York, and he's out of that disaster down there in Florida. Did you hear what Stanton said to the Marlin fans? He was asked at his press conference yesterday at the winter meetings. What's your message to Marlin fans? This is pretty candid. Take a listen to this.
I would say to hang in there. They're hurting. They're going to go through some more tough years. But I would advise them not to give up. Just keep hope. Maybe watch from afar if you're going to watch. But those guys are they battle too. The guys that are out there, they're good kids, and they need some support too.
Watch from afar. Don't pay your money. I love it. I absolutely love it. And you want to talk about accountability? Where was Jeter at the winter meetings? Now you could say, well, an owner isn't supposed to be there. Fine. But when the winter meetings are happening basically a short drive away, and you make as big a deal as this, trading away a franchise player, he couldn't go to the winter meetings, but he showed up at the Dolphins-Patriots game last night on Monday Night Football, sitting in the suite. Unbelievable. It really is. Look yourself in the mirror and be thankful that you're not a fan of that baseball team. Even Cleveland Brown fans, I'm talking to you. Even if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, be happy you're a Browns fan and not a Marlins fan. And if you're both, I don't know what to tell you then. I don't have those answers. 866-ESPN, 866-729-3776. Am I off about this? Am I off? Am I being too hard on Jeter on the situation? We'll talk about it. It's Dan Graca in for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Dan Graca hanging out for Stephen A. here on ESPN Radio, 866-SAY-ESPN, 866-729-3776. Let's say hi to Danny in L.A. Danny, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
I'm well. How are you today?
Good, Dan. What's going on?
So, big Derek Jeter fan. Loved him as the captain. I really do believe he is tarnishing his legacy. Now, you said maybe he shouldn't have been down there at the winter meetings. The guy is the CEO. He's not the owner, per se. Sherman is. He should have been down there. It's just a lack of communication skills. Same thing that he had as an actual player. In my opinion, he's got to call Jerry West, sit down with him, understand how to be a former big league star or a Hall of Famer, and learn how to run a team. The guy's a big disappointment.
Well, Dan, let me ask you a question, though, because you said something that you think that the way things are going for him right now in an ownership capacity is tarnishing his legacy as a player. Is that accurate, though? I mean, is that really fair? And the only reason I say that is, do you think Michael Jordan's legacy is tarnished because he really has not been a very good owner, executive with the Charlotte franchise in the NBA? Because if you ask anybody, and you're going to ask me right now, who's the best basketball player I ever saw, it's Michael Jordan. So I don't think about the guy as an executive. I'm just still seeing the guy who soared through the air and was a dominant assassin on the basketball court.
Absolutely agree with you, Dan, on that. That's a very valid point. Just the love that I've had for Jeter over the years and how he's always demonstrated class. I mean, he's making David Sampson look like a good baseball operations guy. Maybe not tarnish his legacy on the field, but if he doesn't turn this around and is out of the game quickly or has 10 bad years, this could impact his legacy.
We'll see. I mean, Dan, thanks for the phone call. And you brought up David Sampson, and Dave Sampson needs to pipe down. He, of course, was the former president of the Marlins, okay, under Jeff Loria. Was a Survivor contestant. I think he was like the first guy voted off Survivor, too, which says all you need to know about him. Forget about, he's hated down there in Miami by the fans, all 12 of them. Really, they despise him. But Sampson went on with Le Batard last week and actually sat there and had the nerve to call out Jeter, and the guys running the franchise now is saying they don't know what the hell they're doing. Well, wait a second. That's like the pot calling the kettle black. You were completely inept. You were a charlatan. You were swindling those taxpayers down there at a major dollar so you can build a stadium, which turned out to be a disaster, the flamingo sculpture and everything out there in the outfield, and now you're going to sit here and say that somebody else doesn't know what the heck they're doing? How does that make any sense? I mean, come on. Let's be real. JP in Brooklyn up next. JP, you're on ESPN Radio.
Hey, bro, thanks for having me.
What's up, JP?
Did I hear you say that Pittsburgh is going to have problems with New England? I don't think so. It's been like 4 games. Ben Roethlisberger has brought that team back and willed a victory. At least 4 games.
Mm-hmm. When have they ever beaten the Patriots and Brady in a big spot?
This is just a regular game to those guys. This is a regular season game.
Oh, no, JP, and thank you for the call. I got to hit a break. You can't say it's a regular game because you had Mike Tomlin, the coach, go on national TV 3 weeks ago, already talking about the Patriot game. 3 weeks ago. So they're not treating it like a normal game. But again, show me when the Steelers have beaten the Patriots, Brady and Belichick, in a big spot ever. You're not going to find it. Bobby Marks up next. We do some NBA on ESPN Radio.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Channel 80 and the ESPN app.
Jody Avirgan here. I'm glad you're enjoying 30 for 30 podcast, part of a special collection of sports audio documentaries from ESPN Films. We're finding the best sports stories for you right now. And to do that, we're behind the wheel of the Mini Countryman, the biggest mini yet.
Please proceed to the highlighted route.
To find great sports stories, you have to get out into the world and follow your instincts. That's where the Mini Countryman's all-wheel drive comes in handy. With all 4, we can chase down a story in the city, the country, and most places in between. Podcast equipment isn't very bulky, but even if we're hauling a lot of gear, there's plenty of cargo space for all your stuff. And if a few of our producers tag along, no problem. The Mini Countryman comfortably seats 5 adults. The Countryman may be big, but it still drives like a Mini thanks to the twin-power turbo engine. No matter what story you're chasing, the Mini Countryman will help you find it. It's available now, and so are 30 for 30 podcasts. Visit miniusa.com/countryman today.
This is the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
I'm Stephen A. Welcome back. Dan Graca with you here on ESPN Radio, and we're almost a couple of months into the NBA regular season. Good time to take stock now, quarter of the way through, with our excellent ESPN NBA analyst. Here is Bobby Marks. Bobby, it's Dan Graca. Thanks for joining me. How are you?
I'm good, Dan. How are you?
Very good. And let's start with the game we have tonight right down the road at Madison Square Garden with the Knicks and the Lakers. And admittedly, the Knicks have been a little bit more consistent than the Lakers have this year. But let's start with them first. What do you make of this Knicks basketball team, given all the changes that have kind of taken shape for them over the last several months?
A really good team at home and not very good on the road. I think that's how we look at them, at least for the first 2 months. I mean, they've been pretty fortunate. They've had a home heavy schedule. I think 17 out of the 27 games, somewhere around there, have been at home. So my thing with the New York going into the season was not about the record. I think you got to get it from a developmental standpoint. I think you've got to get something in place in the future. I think, what is the rookie Frank Ntilikina? Can you develop him into a starter next year? I think that's going to be the focus with New York. Porzingis' durability is always a concern. Tim Hardaway Jr. has been out. But, to be right around 500, at the 25, 26 mark, I think is something probably we didn't, a lot of us probably didn't expect with this Knicks team.
Yeah, they're 1-8 on the road so far this year. Admittedly, have struggled there, as you pointed out. And look, they're still a young team. They're still trying to build it up to you have yourself a substantial core here that you're going to have in place moving forward. But when you look at this basketball team this year, would you consider it a huge disappointment if they don't make the postseason in what is a watered-down Eastern Conference?
I don't. I think, I think when you look at the East, I think it can probably go, maybe 10 or 11 deep. When you look at Miami kind of on the outside, a lot of us probably didn't expect Indiana to be where they are right now, about 5 games above 500. No, I don't think so. I think that the goal for New York is to be, somewhat relevant after the deadline, to kind of still have your toe in the deep end as far as from a playoff standpoint, and see if the games in March and April actually mean something. Kind of, put some of your younger players in a spot where they haven't been before. So no, I don't think it would be. You'd go into the off season with, probably a lottery pick there. You can get another young player. So I think they're a little bit different than maybe where Philadelphia. I think Philadelphia maybe has that expectation level where, based on their young core there, that them not making the playoffs, I think this year would probably be a little bit of a disappointment.
What are your impressions of what you've seen so far this year from Porzingis, given the fact this is really the first year that he's gone into the season as the guy, as the number one option, no more Carmelo Anthony? How do you think he's handled that so far?
Well, he's embraced it. Not every player can go from the number 2 guy to the number 1 guy. My concern with him always is that, is he going to be a guy that's kind of just in the corner? Is he more of a, is he known just as a stretch 4? And I think he's been able to show a little bit of his versatility. I like that he's been able to post up a lot more this year. So, I think that kind of, we forget how young he is. But for me, and we talked about it earlier, it's always going to be about durability for him. Can you get 70 games out of him during the season to really kind of have that impact?
Now the Lakers, who are in town tonight to take on the Knicks, and you thought that it would be a little bit interesting this year, everything swirling around Lonzo Ball and him being part of the program and the distraction and the questions that were going to come with that. Not because of him, of course, but because of all the nutty things that his father says. But I guess the best way to put it so far, Bobby, is that Lonzo Ball hasn't even been the best rookie on the Lakers this year, hasn't he?
No, he hasn't. I think Kyle Kuzma, I think you can make the claim for him. I mean, especially when you find him late in the 20s, and Lonzo was picked number 2. They're an interesting team. I think a lot of the criticism that Lonzo has gotten, he's we've seen it recently. He's not been in the game, in the fourth quarter. We saw that in the Charlotte game the other night. This is a very good draft class, and when you add Ben Simmons to it from last year, and I think he's kind of evaluated based on what other teams have picked. Donovan Mitchell in Utah, pick 13. Jason Tatum at pick 3. We haven't even seen Markelle Fultz. But it is an interesting team because they've got some placeholders, some veterans with Lopez, Caldwell Pope. I really like what they've been able to get out of Julius Randle. They've kind of identified a role for him. at the end of games here. He's averaging about 8 minutes a game in the fourth quarter. Small ball center. They've got to make a decision on him, what the future is with him. And then, Kuzma has, he's been kind of really flew under the radar. We knew he, had that second round grade, but to, for the Lakers to find him in the late first and for him to be able to contribute is, it's a really good story.
How about year 2 of Brandon Ingram? I mean, clearly he's been a little bit more aggressive in terms of the scoring department, but do you ever foresee him being a legit number one option on the offensive end, or do you think he's best suited to maybe a supporting role on a really good team?
I think probably on a really good team, maybe a supporting role, but I think, it's so hard to, when these kids come into the league and they're 19 or 20 years, we kind of label them after their rookie year as far as where we see them. And I think you really have a good idea, going into their third year of their rookie scale contract. But I like what Ingram's been able to do. There's been a lot of good moments where he's been able to take over games down the stretch here. I would certainly think he's an untouchable piece on that Laker team, just based on his length. He's still so young, and there's still more development to go there.
Obviously, the biggest surprise of this early NBA season has been the ineffectiveness, I think, as a whole of the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now, granted, they're trying to integrate some new pieces with Carmelo Anthony and Paul George, but, even a really, really bad loss last night to the Charlotte Hornets. And, you could say all you want about talent. It takes time to mesh, but do you think it will ever come together, at least in terms of what they hoped it would be, meaning compete for a championship?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, is it just to get into the playoffs now, or is it to try to get into a top 4 seed and push Golden State or Houston, San Antonio like that? I think the clock is ticking here, and you want to give them the benefit of the doubt that it's a team that's just been put together, with Paul George and Carmelo. But there have been some bad losses, Dan. I mean, last night was, for a team that was 1-10 on the road in Charlotte, and basically to go in there and get your doors blown off and really play no defense. It was certainly a wake-up call, and I'm trying to be patient with that team there. But, Sam Presti, their GM's going to have, he's going to have some interesting decisions to make. With Paul George, what do you do with him over the next 6 weeks? If this team continues to hover around 500 and becomes inconsistent, do you try to look to move him? But I don't know what you can get for him based on an expiring contract. And I think what we learned from Oklahoma City is that although you get some of the name players, Paul George, Carmelo Anthony, when you start depleting your depth, you lose Oladipo, Sabonis, Kanter, McDermott. That certainly takes a lot out of you, and that bench is not very good. I mean, besides what Raymond Feldman's been able to do, but Patrick Patterson hasn't given you. You got to, we see Singler and Collison some nights there. Alex Abrinas is only in his second year there. So once you get past their main guys, there's really not that next layer there.
Do you think that Billy Donovan is ultimately going to pay the price and be the fall guy in that situation? Or, like you said, Paul George is an expiring contract. Who knows what his future is going to be there in Oklahoma City? Do they maybe look to move some of the pieces instead of making the head coach be the one to pay the price?
Well, I think they're gonna be as patient as they can with Billy Donovan. That's not Sam's MO as far as to have a short fuse as far as with coaches. Scott Brooks was there for a while. Billy's been there for I think about three or 4 years right now. So he's not a Sam's not a guy to have a quick trigger as far as so I think he will see this through to the end here. The problem with moving pieces is that as I mentioned, George is an expiring. Carmelo's got a no trade. The Adams contract is pretty big, and you've traded away draft picks you've traded away 2 first-round picks in the next 4 years. So, basically the improvement there is that you're hoping that this chemistry kind of clicks in here.
Talking with Bobby Marks, our NBA insider here at ESPN. The Nets make another move for one of the top few picks of the 2015 draft, and Sean Marks is doing a good job of collecting them over there. First, D'Angelo Russell, now he's got Jahlil Okafor. What do you think about Okafor's future in Brooklyn, and more importantly, his future in the NBA? Because, the conventional big man with back to the basket, those guys are a dying breed now, it seems.
They are, but I think we might start to see that back a little bit more. With this is a good draft coming up here in June. It's more of a center dominated. So are we starting to see a little bit of a cycle coming back to the bigs? We forget that Okafor is only 21. He turns 22, I think, on Friday here, so he's still young. It's his fourth year of his rookie contract. More of a numbers crunch in Philly. Didn't fit the way they were playing. New general manager in Brian Colangelo instead of Sam Hinkie. You're right. I mean, he's a back-to-the-basket guy, more for the half court. How does he fit in with a Brooklyn team that does like to get up and down a little bit, shoots a lot of threes, spreads out the court? I think what Sean was able to do is get him and Nick Stauskas. It's a 5-month evaluation period, and you get a 2019 second-round pick from the Knicks here. So there's really no risk in doing so. If he plays and he overexceeds his contract, then that's a good problem to have there.
What do you make of the sudden uptick that the Cavaliers and LeBron James have been on right now? Do you think it was a case of maybe just the aftershock at the beginning of no Kyrie and a little bit of a different cast of characters, and now you're starting to see them finally mesh together, and they're not even whole yet?
Well, you're right, and I think when I look at it, I look at the first sample of, I guess, probably up into that Washington game that Friday night when he went for 50-plus points, it almost was like Cleveland had too many players to choose from. They were, and that sometimes that's a good thing. I saw it in Brooklyn, and sometimes it's a counter negative where you go 11 or 12 deep, and the Thompson injury, the Derrick Rose being out, Shumpert being out, it almost shrunk the rotation down to 9 players there, and it forced Ty Lue to probably play as the guys that he felt gives them the best chance instead of experiment with different lineups here. So now it'll be interesting when I think Thompson will be back within a day or two. What happens to Rose, and when Shumpert gets back, do you kind of stick with the guys you have there? But, LeBron is, as good as ever. Wade has certainly, kind of found the fountain of youth a little bit. Calderon has really done a nice job, kind of stabilized that point guard position there. So, the stretch of games they were able to, go through, after 13 out of 14, somewhere around there, really gave them separation from a team like Toronto. We'll see what happens with Washington. Those teams that are in that 3 to 5 range. Milwaukee, you could throw in there.
Do you really think that this Celtics team can knock them off when we get to the postseason? I mean, it's one thing to be able to just be the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference like they were last year. No Gordon Hayward, of course, but do you believe this Celtics team can actually take out LeBron once we get to the postseason?
No, I don't.
Plain enough.
I think Boston's a great story. I really do. I mean, hey, the Hayward injury, I thought they would probably be in that 4 to 5 range. I still thought they would be a playoff team. I mean, they're as good defensively, so maybe if you want to hang your hat on that, when we get into the playoffs here, I just think they're going to have a hard time scoring the ball. I really do. I mean, and how much, when does Tatum eventually hit the rookie wall here? When does Jaylen Brown kind of falter a little bit? Those guys have been really, really good. Now we've got the Marcus Morris injury. How long is he going to be out for? I think probably what we need to pay attention with them is, do they pick up a player, closer to the deadline? They've got that $8.4 million disabled player exception. So is a guy like Nerlens Noel out there once he gets healthy, a kind of a, another rim protector there. But no, it's hard to bet against Cleveland once you get into an Eastern Conference Finals, and I'm not willing to do that, with LeBron.
Until he's beaten, he's still the guy to be running the top of the mountain. We know that for sure, Bobby. Thanks so much for the time. As always, great stuff, and we'll catch up soon.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, Bobby Marks, our very own excellent ESPN NBA analyst. More to do here. Dan Graca filling in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
You're listening to the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Dan Graca in for Stephen A. We're going to the top of the hour here on ESPN Radio. You know the number. It's 866-ESPN, 866-729-3776. You can tweet at me at Dan Graca, Graca. Boy, the comment I made earlier in the show about doing all your shopping from home apparently ruffled some feathers. Got a lot of people attacking me. Mike, go support small business, on and on. Well, I didn't mean anything by it, and look, I'm not against anything. It's just that, sometimes you don't feel like dealing with the crowds, dealing with the fight. Let them bring it to you. But I could see both sides of it. As far as the NBA is concerned, though, and we thank Bobby Marks for hopping on with us, big game tonight down at the Garden with the Knicks and the Lakers. I'll be there doing Knicks pre and post for our ESPN station in New York. And it's one of those games where I think both clubs probably are approaching this thing as if, this is a game that's certainly winnable and one that we should get as we try to maybe take that next step to build the program and to stamp ourselves as a legitimate postseason contender. Now, the Lakers come in having won a couple of games here on the road. Remember, they had that buzzer beater in Philly last week, and then they followed it up with another good victory in Charlotte against the Hornets. And the Knicks kind of averted disaster, if you want to be frank about it, on Sunday night when they were able to beat the Atlanta Hawks at home, and really courtesy of the play of their bench for coming through. Doug McDermott pouring in 23 points, Ron Baker playing some big minutes for them. And if you're the Knicks, the fact that they lost that game the night before in Chicago against the god-awful Bulls, that would have been a horrific set of circumstances if this Knicks team ended up losing to Chicago and then losing again to the Hawks on back-to-back nights. You just cannot have that. So the Knicks were able to rally and at least get the victory. And as we speak right now, the Knicks are in a three-way tie for that last playoff spot in the NBA's Eastern Conference with Miami and with the Philadelphia 76ers. And look, it's going to be tough going for them, especially with Tim Hardaway out for, who knows how much longer. I think it's probably on the weeks, plural. I don't think we could be too optimistic and say that he's expected back. They're going to be cautious with him. They're not just going to throw him back out there, dealing with the stress injury to his lower leg. He's going to be re-examined now in another week, and then we'll see where we go from there. But I wouldn't be making any plans in terms of being optimistic of seeing Hardaway back out on the court. And in his absence, other guys are going to have to pick up the slack. We talked about Courtney Lee having to take on more of a role offensively in terms of scoring points. Doug McDermott's going to have to add a little bit more punch off the bench. And Porzingis is going to have to be Porzingis. And now, admittedly, teams are not going out there and just allowing him to dictate the flow of the game. They're guarding him up. They're making life miserable from him. There's not as much space for him to work with offensively as there was maybe in the early part of the season in those first 10 games when he was basically just going out there and doing whatever he pleased. Now things are coming a little bit more difficult for him, and rightfully so. This is a guy who, everybody around the league heard everything that was being written, said about him in the early part of that season. So now, whenever the Knicks are on the schedule, they know that is the guy we got to stop. When the coaches devise a game plan and a strategy to beat this Knicks team, hey, Porzingis is the guy we got to shut down. And if nobody else is going to be able to contribute, and if there aren't any other capable scoring options, it's going to be a rough night for the Knicks. So back at it tonight against the Lakers. Knicks have played well at home this year. That's some sort of confidence you take into tonight's game. They've won 12 out of 17 at home this year, and eventually they're going to have to take their game on the road. And after the new year, they're going to have to play some games away from Madison Square Garden. In fact, the majority of their games away from MSG. The game that they have on Christmas Day against the Philadelphia 76ers, that I believe is going to be their 21st home game of the season. So think about that. The second half of the year, after New Year's, they're going to be playing a lot of games away. And right now, they only have one win on the road this season, which is hard to believe. Now, they've only played 9 games, which, if I'm not mistaken, that's got to be the fewest in the NBA, or at least close to it. Off the top of my head, 9 road games in the early part of the season. So if the Knicks are going to break that playoff hex, and if they are going to do something special this year and get to the postseason, they're going to have to win away from Madison Square Garden. And look, the Lakers are in a little bit more of a dogfight out there in the Western Conference. I think if you're the Lakers this year, I don't even think making the postseason is the ultimate goal and the ultimate objective. It's really more about identifying who's going to be part of this moving forward and who isn't. Not all that different from what the Knicks are trying to experience themselves. You're a young team. You have a young core. You have some young players here. They hit a slam dunk, it looks like, with Kyle Kuzma, who we talked about with Bobby Marks, and who's really been the best rookie on the Lakers. Apologies to Lonzo Ball. But with the Clippers going through their struggles this year in L.A. repeatedly, it's an opportunity for the Lakers to kind of just say, hey, we may not have the star power as that other team in town right now, but our future is bright. And, of course, with Magic Johnson pulling the strings and, dictating where that organization is going to be headed, I think there are a lot of things there worth watching. So when you look at these two teams tonight at Madison Square Garden, I think there's a lot of similarities between the Knicks, between the Lakers, kind of trying to get back to being upper echelon in the NBA. So it should be a little intriguing later tonight down there at MSG. When we come back, we will continue your phone calls. Football, a lot of people want to still talk about the Stanton move to the Yankees and the Derek Jeter disaster that is now the Miami Marlins. 866-ESPN, 866-729-3776. Dan Graca until the top of the hour, in for Stephen A. on ESPN Radio.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Rolling till the top of the hour on a Tuesday afternoon. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. Smith. It's ESPN Radio. 866-ESPN, 866-729-3776, the telephone number. Let's say hi to Leo in Florida, who's on ESPN Radio. What's up, Leo?
Hey, what's going on?
Hey, Leo, what's going on? How are you?
Listen, I'm a Miami boy, born and raised, and I grew up when Miami didn't have a baseball team.
Right.
And everything about their organization has always been that they've been a farm system from day one, almost starting from like 93. It's it's almost sickening, really, because everybody's mad about Jeter selling out Stanton to the Yankees, but nobody said anything when Beckett and Lowell were traded away. It's to me, to the Red Sox, when they were a farm system for the Red Sox, for the Tigers, for everyone else, Stanton didn't tell us anything new.
You know what's amazing to me, Leo, about the Marlins? And not even so much 97, because 97 they were supposed to win, right? I mean, that was a stacked deck. They were supposed to win that team. We know that they dismantled it soon after, but one of the great mysteries in sports, as we check back on recent history, is that the Marlins won a championship in 2003. Under Jeff Luria's watch, they won a world championship and beat the New York Yankees. That, to me, is one of the most improbable things that's happened in sports in this millennium. It really is. I still have to wrap my mind around that one.
Yeah, but the thing is that they sold all those guys out, and they gave them all to the Red Sox, and they said, well, every year has always been a rebuilding year, and everybody's mad at Jeter. And all these fans are mad at Stanton for leaving. And the fact of the matter is that since the inception of the stadium, everybody's always known that the Marlins are broke. They insulted another city in the Miami-Dade area who was willing to buy land for them so that their Broward County fans can have access to them. And Tri-Rail was willing to build something so that they can get in there. And so they could get everybody in there. It was going to be a logistical dream, and it didn't matter anyway. They went ahead and tore down a historical landmark in the Orange Bowl just because they wanted the Miami skyline. And all it is the most ostentatious eyesore you've ever seen off of State Road 836. And it's almost unfair that people keep looking at this team and saying, well, what else could we expect? We've just been nothing but a major league farm system. It's really all it is.
Yeah, but like I said, that's why it's so strange that there were a couple of world championships mixed in, Leo. But everything you're saying is spot on, and I echoed those remarks earlier about the stadium, and it's just been a complete mess for everybody down there. And not to mention, what the ball club is giving you on the field. And I thank you for the phone call. Now, look, what happened with Jose Fernandez was a tragedy. It really did. And that really left that team in a rut in so many ways more than baseball. That guy was the face of the franchise. He was a huge hit with the fans, and he was going to be a megastar. Jose Fernandez was more popular than Giancarlo Stanton. Not even close. Not even close. So not only do they lose an ace pitcher and one of the best pitchers in baseball, but they lose, to some, a connection to that community down there. And they really have not gotten over that yet, and who knows if they will. It's going to be a good long while. And now you have Jeter in there and cleaning out seemingly whatever's left. And, I mean, just D. Gordon, Giancarlo Stanton, that's the beginning. If you follow Twitter and reading some of the things that are happening down at the winter meetings, I mean, put two and two together. They're going to be shopping Marcell Ozuna. They're going to be shopping Christian Yelich. Why stop at those guys? I mean, he really is going to rip this thing down to where they may not even win 60 games next year. I mean, it's going to be a disaster. But here's the problem. If you're going to do that, the only way that you're going to be competitive is if you get sizable returns on your assets. And so far, the guys that they got back for Stanton, for D. Gordon from the Seattle Mariners, they really aren't upper echelon prospects. I mean, think about this. The Yankees, the jewels of their farm system, the guys who were rated in the top 5, that's not what they had to give up. Because the Yankees just took on the money more than anything else, and if you're going to take on a hefty share of the contract, then you're not going to have to part with as many valuable commodities as you have in your organization. I think that's another reason why people are scratching their heads and saying, well, what is he doing? He's basically just giving them away. Now, they liked the return they were getting with St. Louis, with San Francisco, but because Stanton had the no trade, he didn't want to go there. So then Jeter had, both hands tied behind his back, and he had to find a way to see if he can unload that contract, and he was desperate to do so, knowing full well he wasn't going to get anything in return. Starlin Castro, who they just got back. What are the chances that Starlin Castro is a Marlin come opening day? I mean, there's talk even the Mets are checking in on Starlin Castro now. Hey, can we take him off your hands? Will you pick up some of his salary? Jose in New Jersey on ESPN Radio. What's up, Jose?
Hey, how you doing, guys? I think that sometimes you have to take 2 steps back to go forward. I mean, look at the Patriots franchise. Look at a lot of these franchises that were bad in the beginning, including the Yankees before they hit that 76, 77 run. They had to do things that didn't make people happy. And as far as the stadium, if you put a product out there, they will come. And Jeter has been around a very good franchise, and I think he's got to do a lot of things that hurt a lot of people. But at the long run, I think it's going to work out for him. And then one quick question about the Jets. Who would they look for in the draft if they get anybody as one of these quarterbacks, or maybe even giving the guy who's been kneeling a chance to come and play over there? But I forgot his name.
Kaepernick, no chance he's ever going to be a Jet. Jose, thanks for the phone call. As far as the draft, who knows? I mean, we're still so early in the process. We don't know, how these guys are going to be ranked or where they're going to be rated, and more importantly, where the Jets going to be picking in the draft. We have no idea. I did just see, though, moments ago that the Jets have been installed as a 16-point underdog Sunday in New Orleans against the Saints. So Bryce Petty going to have his hands full. 16 points might be a little much. And I'm sure what's factoring into that is, the performance that they put forward in Denver the other day, too. And I think a lot of people are sitting back and just saying, well, we expected this. We expected them to go south, and it's just going to be a horrible year for them. And maybe they think that the Denver game is going to be the tip of the iceberg, and they're just going to continue down that path. I don't necessarily think so. Do I think they're going to go into New Orleans and win the game? I mean, it's tough to be able to sit here and say that, but I certainly would expect them to play a heck of a lot better than they did last week in Denver. But quarterback will probably be on the list of things, and you're going to find out over the next 3 weeks. This is an opportunity for Bryce Petty. Not necessarily that he's going to be installed as the starter next year, but he's going to be playing some teams, the Saints this week, who are gunning for the playoffs, the Chargers next week, who are also gunning for a division title, and who knows what that Week 17 game is going to be for the New England Patriots. They may not have, home field wrapped up yet or a first-round bye, so these are 3 meaningful games that we're going to get a chance to see Bryce Petty in an audition for. Meaningful games for the opposition, not so much for the Jets. But it's still going to be a valuable evaluation. We saw Petty last year a little bit. Wasn't great. Got injured, unfortunately. And who knows? Christian Hackenberg is actually going to be active for these games. Maybe he finds his way onto the field, and we get a little bit of a sample size of what the former second-round pick is going to be. So there are still some storylines for the Jets here as we move through the season. Ryan in Atlanta, you're on ESPN Radio. How are you?
Hey, Dan. Thanks a lot for taking my call.
Hey, Ryan. Good.
Good, sir. Just a quick question. When you look at Westbrook, just to switch it back to the NBA quickly, when you look at Westbrook and you think about how Oladipo's thriving in Indiana, I think they're 16-11, 5 games over 500.
Which is shocking, by the way.
Very shocking. But you think about how Oladipo wasn't thriving that well there in OKC beside Westbrook. And I'm thinking you got to put a lot of the blame on Westbrook. You look at Chris Paul. Somebody say, oh, he's so ball dominant. He's been able to go down with Harden and keep the string going down there pretty easily. And you think about Westbrook, well, he's never been a typical point guard. And now you got 3, bullheads there. And I just don't think Westbrook is the personality of a point guard because he's never been that Chris Paul type of guy who can get other guys going. So how much of the blame do you put on Westbrook and how much do you put on Billy Donovan?
It's hard to say, Ryan, because look, I mean, even when he came into the NBA, we knew that Russell Westbrook wasn't going to be he wasn't Jason Kidd, right? He wasn't John Stockton. He wasn't a pass-first point guard. That's not who he is. Russell Westbrook is a freak and does things on the basketball court that not many guys his size can do, right? And I think at the end of the day, you would still probably want that guy on your team as opposed to a guy who's just going to be a distributor. Now, the Victor Oladipo thing that's happened this year, look, Darren Collison is his point guard. That's good. But the production that he's putting forward this year, granted, it's only 25 games or so. We haven't seen that from Victor Oladipo. We haven't seen this since Indiana, right? Back when he was in college. So, I don't know, maybe just a light has gone on in his head, and all of a sudden he gets it, and maybe, just maybe, he figures, all right, now I get this NBA thing. I've kind of figured it out a little bit, and he's taken his game to another level. But I don't necessarily say it's Westbrook's fault or him escaping Russell Westbrook, because that's who Westbrook is, right? This is the guy who's still the reigning MVP, and you would still want him on your team over Victor Oladipo. I can promise you that. Ryan, thank you for the phone call. I mean, those are tough decisions. And that's why Oklahoma City, when they put this team together, and they brought in a Paul George, they brought in a Carmelo Anthony. Carmelo's a guy who's very ball dominant. You know that. That is a guy that he needs the basketball in his hands to be able to be successful, right? He's not going to play off the ball and do a lot of things to be able to contribute to help you win. Paul George is another one of these guys who is used to being the guy for the Indiana Pacers, right? Or when he was an Indiana Pacer. Now having to adjust. And meantime, Westbrook, I think early in the season, had to sacrifice his game a little bit, and he was kind of almost deferring to those other guys, even though this is the reigning MVP we were talking about in the NBA. But I really find it ironic how you have Indiana, who sent Paul George to Oklahoma City. You have the Knicks, who, of course, sent Carmelo to Oklahoma City. And both Indiana and New York have better records than the Thunder do right now. I don't know if it's going to stay that way, but we're already almost, 2.5 months into the season, 25 games, and it hasn't clicked yet. Still a lot of basketball to be played, and that's why I posed that question to Bobby Marks. How patient are they going to be with Billy Donovan? Because this could be a fly-by-night proposition for the Thunder, because Paul George could be gone at the end of the year. And in the summertime, everything was great, and he talked about, I wanted to make Oklahoma City, my future home, and I could easily see myself signing here long-term. You could, even if you're going to be 500 like this, or sub-500, and be a losing basketball team? It's funny how things have a way of working themselves out, and they don't go according to plan, and I think the Thunder are case in point with that, don't you? 866-ESPN, 866-729-3776. We roll on till the top of the hour. Dan Graca in for Stephen A. It's ESPN Radio.
Guess what?
You're in the middle of the Stephen A. Smith Show podcast.
Damn it, I mean it!
Dan Graca in for Stephen A. We're going to the top of the hour here on ESPN Radio. 866-SAY-ESPN, 866-729-3776. A good bit of injury news as far as the NBA is concerned. Kawhi Leonard, arguably one of the top 5 players in the sport, going to make his season debut tonight for the San Antonio Spurs when they visit the Dallas Mavericks. So he ends up missing 27 games to start it off. And give Popovich, give the Spurs credit, give LaMarcus Aldridge some credit, who's played some good basketball here, that they're sitting there at 19-8 and only 4 back in the loss column right now from the Houston Rockets atop the Western Conference. So they've been able to stem the tide a little bit, and we'll see how long it takes Kawhi to get into the flow. I'm sure there's going to be a little bit of rust, maybe a little bit of uncertainty when you're talking about the injury. And it's funny because Popovich, I guess it was a few weeks ago, he was talking about it saying, I've never seen anything like this in terms of the injury. I really haven't. So they get him back, and they're going to need him to stay in the lineup because full well, if the Spurs want to be considered a legitimate contender, a serious contender in the NBA, they're going to need this guy. Think back to that Western Conference final last year in a game number 1 and what happened when he was in the lineup and when he was out of the lineup and everything that was different. He's a very, very good player and arguably, as I said, as good a player as you have in the entire NBA. And just circling back to something we were talking about earlier in the show with the Patriots and the Steelers, and we're going to talk a lot about it, of course, as we move forward to the weekend and the actual game itself on Sunday. But since Brady and Belichick joined forces with the Pats, head-to-head against the Pittsburgh Steelers, they're 10-3. 10-3. And one of those 3 Steeler wins was when Matt Castle was the quarterback in 2008, when Brady was out of the mix. But every big game they've played, and they've met 3 times in the postseason, including the championship games in 01, in 04, and last year, Pats have won them all. And I know that it's not a playoff game on Sunday, but it's still a big game. And that's why the Patriots are going to win. And if they're not, I'd be shocked. I'd be absolutely shocked. 866-SAY-ESPN. Let's say hi to Jeter in L.A. Jeter, how are you?
Hey, Dan, how you doing?
Jeter, well, good. What's going on, my man?
Good. Who's your favorite baseball team?
I really don't have a favorite baseball team.
A good answer. I'm just amazed about this Stanton trade. The Marlins haven't been talked about so much over the last 3 years. And it's like, I'm amazed how they're throwing Derek under the bus right now. Because, all we talk about, and I listen to these L.A. radio show people, they're just really ticked off because the Dodgers didn't make a move for Stanton, okay? And I'm sure the Cardinals are like that. I can't imagine what those are showing. But do you understand what the business plan is for the Marlins moving forward?
Well, how about this? Does Jeter understand what the business plan is?
So let me ask you a question. Were the Marlins going to win with the current roster over the next 2 or 3 years?
You mean to tell me you couldn't? Jeter, thank you for the phone call. We got to go. You mean to tell me the Marlins didn't have talent? If you go out there and bring in, let's say, a pitcher or 2, with that lineup they have, they couldn't at least contend for a wild card? Absolutely they could. Jeter is still getting his feet wet when it comes to being the boss, and there's some rough waters ahead, believe me, and there's been several missteps so far. Thanks to Nuno and Kat. Thanks to Bobby Marks. We'll talk to you soon. It's Dan Graca on ESPN Radio.
That's just a sample of what you'll hear on the Stephen A. Smith Show. Weekdays at 1 p.m. Eastern on Sirius XM Channel 80 and the ESPN app.